Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Crowdcast webinar today. My name is Brian T. O'Neill. I know people are just dropping into the session now, so going to just give it a minute or two here for people to come in. So drop a comment in. Let me know where you're coming from. If you have your finest Zoom threads on, even though we're not using Zoom, that's good to know because I do want to judge people's shirts today. If you happen to come up on the camera, we will be giving fashion advice during this 30-minute or so talk. I'm talking to B. I don't know if that's actually your first name, B, but was pretty bad early September. It's been good the last little while. Yeah. I know. I think my friend Amber is going to be joining here from Pactera. He's out in that part of the world, the U.S. Crazy situation there with smoke and soot and being trapped in the house. You got COVID going on and fire, and it's just like, what's next? A giant earthquake? God forbid. So, hey, Amber, what's going on? Amy, hey, trusted. Excellent. Good to see you. No. It sounded like you had no earthquake. Yes, I know. Don't say anything. It's just like, what's next for 2020? Well, I just checked the calendar and it's only 84 days until 2021. Believe it or not, this year has flown by, and hopefully we'll get a nice reset into 2021. So cool. I'm going to give it about one more minute here because I want to respect your time. And my goal today was, again, to try to fly through my slides quickly, 30 minutes, and then jump into Q&A if you guys have any. And if you're still sticking around, maybe I'll play a little vibraphone for you guys on a Friday to just kind of relax and take a breath from the craziness of work and all of that. So I've been doing a little bit of music intro in front of these webinars, but I thought today I would put it at the end since it's a shorter one. So I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to jump right into the session so we can respect your time. It looks like we got about 10 folks on here. Helen and Ashmitha and Nathan and Matt, Rishi, and user 4E3B1AC5. Wow, it's so good to see you again. And also user DE4242A0. Excellent. I guess the API is working well. So nice to have you guys back. I'm not sure if those are first names or last names. I've never seen a number in a name before. So very engineering-like. Anyhow, okay, I'm going to jump in to the slides here. And we'll go from there. And I'm not going to take questions until the end, mostly because the user experience of using Keynote and Crowdcast is not so great. I actually lose the entire window when I go into there. So I will check back in at the end of the slides and take your questions. Okay, so let's jump in here. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. And as a quick test, just to make sure, you should be seeing my slides. I'm going to exit my slideshow really quick and just ask you in the chat if you see the slides. So I'm exiting my full screen. And if someone could just pop a note in and say they saw the first slide, that would be fantastic. Thumbs up. Yes. Okay, great, guys. Here we go. So today, again, this is a CxO leadership focus, how to create innovative analytics and machine learning software customers will love. This is very much going to be strategic and high level. It's not so much focused on tactics. And I am going to share 8 specific behaviors that I think data-driven teams, particularly technical teams that maybe don't have design or product resources on them, can be adopting and should be adopting. And that's kind of what the focus is today. So the assumption here is that your team isn't regularly deploying useful, usable, valuable, data-driven software. And so you're coming here because you're wondering, is there something I could be doing better here? And a lot of this, in my experience from the conversations I have and the clients I talk to, there's a tech/data first culture instead of a customer second culture. So we're often looking at data sets as things and that we try to turn into some kind of value. And we rarely start with the last mile, which is the customer experience and the business problems, and trying to figure out how can the data serve the people. So I want to talk about this because data scientists, for example, they tend to focus a lot on precision, for example, when they're building models. I know a lot of them are spending a lot of time doing data engineering and cleanup and all of that, but they often get lost in the precision of models. We spend a lot of time building infrastructure and pipelining and all of that. And the time it takes to build out these systems, even to just get to the beginning of AI, if you're doing that, can be significant. And the customer can get lost in this. Engineers are obviously focused on code quality, stability, shipping features, hitting sprints, all these kinds of things. And a lot of times the customer just gets lost. And when we've invested so much in the technology, it's very hard to step back and throw away things that aren't working well. The tendency is to want to go ahead and just put out whatever's been invested in so far because it's too late to turn back. So how do we change this? Well, first of all, we have to agree it's a problem. And this just came out yesterday. That this was shocking, but this is a comment yesterday from this guy, David Kuhn, who I only know from LinkedIn. And he sells a product, a data product. And he said, I met dozens of data science teams at various companies. Less than half of those had plans to going into production, and less than half of those plan to actually support their end users. So just right there, think about that for a second. My largest disappointment was a bank where the production solution was based on a database and a batch run of R scripts. When I asked what about the potential users who don't know R or SQL, which is most of them, the guy told me deadpan that those without technical skills are not relevant and will not be helped. And he, smartly so, said, I thanked him for the insights and scheduled a follow-up to see how the damage went and whether they could perhaps provide some help later on. This is scary. This is not unusual. The customer is in the way. The culture within particularly IT departments and sometimes data science and analytics teams is that the customers are the problem. The stakeholders are the problem. They don't know what they want. And there's so much that could be done if there was just more clarity there from the asks. This mindset has to change, or you're never going to get better at this. You might get lucky once in a while, but you're not going to routinely get better at producing indispensable data products and decision support applications. And on the concept of AI, I'm not just going to talk, we're not going to talk just about AI. We're going to talk about decision support today and data products in general, which may or may not leverage advanced analytical techniques. Because I think from the people that I've worked with in my seminar and my consulting and training, 80% of the value of what design and product thinking can do for your organization is the vanilla kind of design thinking and product management stuff. It's not specialized stuff where if you're not doing X, Y, and Z in the AI mindset, that's what's going to make or break your solution. We're talking about vanilla things that almost any organization, if they're willing to put the right people in charge to lead teams and they're willing to invest there, they can do this. You don't even need to be a designer to do all of this. There's a lot of behaviors that can change that data people can do if the leadership decides it's important. And so I'm going to talk about that today. And there will be a little offer at the end of this slideshow. So if you don't like that, you'll know when you can dive out of the seminar, presentation if you're not interested. But I'm going to talk to you about some ways that I can help you with these areas if you care about that. So again, the mindset of the team has to change, and that's the theme today. So what I want you to think about mostly is this. If your data-driven software has humans in the loop, we're not talking about fully automated systems, the mindset has to shift from outputs to outcomes. The idea of quality and value has to become a focus on, did we provide actionable decision support to the humans for which we are serving with the data products that we are creating? If that doesn't happen, you don't get points. You don't get credit. The technology you built, the cloud, the private public cloud, the infrastructure you stood up, you don't get points for that. You only get points when the humans put the information into use. And that may mean not doing anything because the information suggests that. But that insight, that's the thing that you need to measure as the source of value, because that's where the business value actually happens. So what do I mean by outputs to outcomes? Outputs are models, apps, tools, dashboards, reports, data pipelines, clouds, all these infrastructure things. They're nouns, right? Outcomes are things like customers saying, I know what to buy, and I know when, and I know what the price. I know I can go into the next season with confidence. This slide originally came from some predictive analytics in the farming and agricultural space, or I can make an informed next move. And this had to do with what seeds should I buy for next season, and what are the weather forecasts, and how's my soil doing, and all these types of aspects. understanding those kinds of practical decisions that the human makes in the last mile, that's what really makes the data powerful, is if you can help them make those decisions. That's what they care about. How you arrived at those predictions, where the data came from. Yes, it's the transparency there matters at certain times, but there's no blanket answer for how much you need to be providing the evidence behind your technology versus the conclusion. That comes from understanding the customers that you serve and how much detail they require to believe your information. So who am I? I'm originally a musician and percussionist by training, and that's part of my career. And I also run Designing for Analytics. I'm the founder and principal, and I help software leaders turn machine learning and analytics into indispensable data products. And some of you might also know I host the Experiencing Data podcast. So we interview leaders in the data-driven software space about how they are using human-centered design in their practice of trying to put data to use to serve people. And so you can check that out on my website if you're interested. So today, 8 human-centered behaviors that I'm hoping that your team can adopt today. But first, let's talk quickly about this software culture of the non-digital natives. And I'm really, this presentation and talk today can probably apply to some tech companies as well, especially the engineering-driven ones that are out there. But I'm really kind of thinking today in terms of my audience about people that are not working at software companies. And so a lot of times you have an IT-driven a cost center versus a center of excellence and innovation. So it's ticket driven. It's someone requested a spreadsheet with these things and these columns of data, and I'm supposed to return that back. It's very much this output and provide some solution and then pass it back to them and move on to the next thing. This is kind of antithetical to the idea of data products and a product mindset, which I'm going to talk about in a second. A lot of them fear startups and tech companies as eating their lunch, but what a lot of these companies that are trying to innovate with data don't do is they don't copy the way modern software companies, especially the consumer-driven ones, how they actually create software and the process that goes into that, especially the non-technical aspects of building solutions. And so that we're going to talk more about that today. A lot of the top tech companies, you're going to see very strong product management and design and user experience functions. They're going to have resources dedicated to these functions because they understand that simply having engineering and technology is insufficient to provide value to customers. And I think the more and more we get very complex and technical data products, the more important this is going to become, because the number of things that we could come up with the data sets that are these giant data sets is growing, the possibilities of what could be produced. And so we need the curation. The user experience needs to be intentionally designed. It cannot just emerge as a byproduct of a technical effort that's been put into place. And again, this gets back to this technical solution without adoptions. If you don't have human adoption, if you don't have usability, if you don't have utility in the solution, you don't get credit. Customers don't give you points for that. If anything, you get docked for it. So this mindset of just shipping the code, and I love prototyping, and we're going to talk about that as well. I love moving quickly, but I love moving quickly to learn and to iterate, and not simply to just ship whatever code has been written to get it out there because we assume the output we create will, by definition, be good for the customer. Team design is really important, which means you have a collaborative effort between the most critical parties in the loop. And so for me, my process here that I recommend to people is you have a power trio of a minimum of a product. I'm going to use these titles, which may be slightly different in your org, but there's someone that's a product manager who owns the ultimate business responsibility. You have a designer involved, and you have a tech lead. Now, you will obviously have other people, such as a subject matter expertise can come into the picture. You may need to have separate engineering and data science or analytics expertise on the team. But at a minimum, you have those 3 different voices at the table that are pushing and pulling. And part of the design job is to also go figure out who is missing in the room, who else should be here that is not here, and pulling those people in at the right time, because a lot of the design job is about facilitating the right groups of people being in the room together to figure out ultimately what does this customer need that we're going to serve. And so this this diverse set of people that are in the room also helps us really understand the entire customer problem, and it helps us frame that problem from different perspectives. It also helps us balance what's technically possible with what's necessary and what's aspirational from and this is where design can help, is figuring out what would the most kick-ass solution look like, what does the aspirational view look like, and you have this natural tug again between business, what's possible with the technology and the data, and what's aspirational. And you come to some conclusion that's usually a compromise between these, but it doesn't compromise the customer. That's the most important part here. And the final one here, especially this is really true for AI, is that you hear a lot about operationalization, and I kind of hate this word because it sounds like something you do distinctly when you're deploying AI. It's a separate activity. And I think this is totally wrong. I think that operationalization is almost like a feature. Think about it as a feature in the application. You can't decouple that from building the model and all of this. And I understand that not everybody is going to do every stage of development of a machine learning application or system. I get that. But you can't have people on the team who think that my job is simply to build the model. I don't know what they're going to do with it later. Not my problem. To me, this is a recipe for disaster. Those people need to be thinking about the entire life cycle, and they need to have empathy for the ultimate end users of the software, even if they're not going to own that entire experience. So operationalization cannot be decoupled from this process. So again, if you're worried about startups and big tech, or even the startups eating your lunch, why aren't you copying what they're doing? And so I'm going to give you some things that I think you can copy here. So here are these 8 different ideas. The first one is a mindset shift, which is adjusting to the gray world of design and irrational people. So understanding that behavior, emotions, illogical people, the way people make decisions about things, you have to learn to embrace this. Your team has to learn to understand that not everybody else is analytical in the way they do things. And if you can embrace that mindset, it can open you up to considering solutions that you may have not considered, or you may think maybe aren't the right ways to do things, because you know what's possible with the data in your head. And so this is really the first shift, is that we have to decide we care as an organization, that this stuff matters, and that this is a people problem. A lot the design, the point of the design here is to connect people to the technology. And so that has to be fundamental in what we're doing. Why does it start with 0 for you software people? I know a lot of you like base 0 counting, so I just threw that in for you software people out there. So I thought you'd like the first one starts with 0. Okay, that's my only joke, I swear. Number 1 here, or number 2, depending on how you think about it, creative culture, embracing a creative culture that embraces empathy, routine one-on-one customer research, and loving problem finding, or falling in love with the problem. This is probably the number 1 thing that doesn't get done sufficiently, is that the teams are completely out of step with what their customers want to do. They are issued a set of written requirements, for example, and we've heard about this old waterfall style of design, and now we sometimes talk about agile, and most places are really just doing incremental development pushed into 2 to 4 week sprints, but they're not really embracing the customer and that. And I'm not here to talk about agile software development today, but I am here to talk about the lack of customer representation in the process, and a complete lack of empathy, as you saw in that first slide. The one-on-one FaceTime is probably the most important thing that your team can do, is having a regular cadence of knowing, who do we serve? What's it like to do that job? What's it like to be in procurement, to be in sales, to be in accounting? What does a day in the life of their job look like? How does our data products and our solutions fit into what they're doing all day? When do they use our stuff? How frustrating is it? What does a win look like for these people? What does a failure look like for these people? What is their attitudes about this stuff? This can really open your mind to starting to care, because you start to understand who we're serving. And I would say that non-digital natives, especially if you're building internal tooling, you have an easier problem, because you're not dealing with thousands or millions of kind of anonymous customers where they're just kind of all out there and you don't really know any of them. it's Alice in accounting or Bob in sales or whatever. These become real people, and you start to develop relationships with them, and you bring it starts to foster more of a team environment. And it's actually a lot easier because when you know the team, you know the people, you can start to serve them better. And everybody wins. Like, you get to work on, your team gets to work on stuff they care about because the other colleagues value the work. The recipients of these solutions feel like you're actually helping them, and they start saying, yes, please give me more. This is awesome. What about this? Can you give me that? They care. And ultimately, your downstream customer probably is going to ultimately be the recipient of this value. So it's kind of a win-win-win scenario. And I'm not going to go into how you do all of this necessarily, but the problem finding is the other aspect here. This is really about getting your head around what the real problem is, which is often not articulated in documents and requirements and tickets and stuff that comes out. It's extracted through a process of doing the proper kind of research, because people don't often articulate things in sets of neatly formed problems. They just don't do that. And it may masquerade as one. It may look like, I need a model that predicts, A, B, and C, or I need a spreadsheet that has these columns in it. And it may be such that there's a better way to help the customer, but they don't know that you could possibly do that. So they give you their best guess about what they need. And this is analogous to like going to the doctor and saying, I need a cast, and then they give you a cast. They're not going to do that. They're going to do an assessment of the health of your arm, and then the doctor will determine whether you actually need a cast or not, or a Band-Aid, or maybe just some ice. They don't just deliver exactly what you asked for. They go through a collaborative process to figure out what's actually wrong with your arm. What are the possible things we could do? What are the pros and cons of those things? How might we work together to heal your arm? It's a collaborative process. Hopefully, if you're not, I recommend you go see a different care provider. But this falling in love with the problem and deeply understanding that and framing that's a really big part here. The second one is taking all this information we get and synthesizing it into coherent, human-centered problems that are tied back to business needs. So we often hear about with analytics, it's like, oh, it has to serve the business. Well, you need to remember that the business is a collection of human beings doing work. So and those things aren't always the same, like what the business wants to get out of the data versus what the humans that are in the business want to do or need to do, or unfortunately don't want to do, but they have to do. You need to understand both of those, and those things may not always be in alignment. So this ability to synthesize the research into coherent problems that the whole team can understand is really important. So we're all focused on the same solution, but also the same problem set. There's different techniques for this. It's you can do empathy mapping is a good one that I like here. This is also where I like to do benchmarking, and we figure out what constitutes the current way we do this now, and how good are we at doing this now? Like if we're helping someone make a decision, how do they do it now, and how might we score that in terms of the value, whether it's the time it takes to do it or the accuracy or whatever. You come up with some benchmarks here, so that when you work on the new thing, you actually can say, did we actually move the needle from A to B? So this is you can think about it as KPIs or something like that. There's lots of different tools and methods for doing this. But the point is, we can start to measure whether we're having an impact here. And ultimately, this comes together in what I call a design brief, which is a very, very short document that summarizes to the team and any new people that come on board, what are you doing? How will we know if we did a good job in it? How will we measure this stuff, again, from a customer lens, not a technology lens? The third thing here is journey mapping, service blueprints, onboarding, and honeymooning, and with teams. So what am I talking about here? I would say one of the biggest, especially in the analytics world, one of the biggest misconceptions is that design means data visualization. And data viz is about user interfaces and presenting a set of data in a way that can be understood by the customer. But at a higher elevation, you have experience and users, and you have people moving through software and between applications, maybe doing stuff in the real world and then coming back to the digital space to do stuff. They're going through journeys and activities. Everything happens through time. And so one way to understand how someone moves through a service, and a great example of this is like, imagine your you're shopping for a computer. Am I going to buy this iPhone or that iPhone or whatever? And the entire process of deciding what you want, to the point that you go into an Apple store, to what the experience is like in the store, the purchasing experience, the turning on the phone for the first time, the software onboarding, that this entire life cycle you can see as a map. And we call this journey mapping. Service blueprints are the internal operations version. So think about it. Journey mapping is when you're talking about your external customer who pays for your service and modeling their either their current workflow or their aspirational one. And service blueprints is more how behind the scenes, behind the stage, how do we move someone through a process like processing a loan application. The point here is that you could start to see over time what the customer experience looks like, and you can start to visualize the holes, the problems, the friction. And when a stakeholder wants to know what you're working on, you say, see this? Here's the whole picture. We're working on this slice right here. This one step from step 4 to step 5, this takes a ton of time to do. We lose a lot of people here. That's what this solution is about. That can really help people, again, get on the same page. Number 4 is leading design jams, ideation, sketching, and algorithm design planning if you are using more advanced techniques here. This is about getting visual and getting rid of written words and text to try to explain what we're doing. And sometimes the final output of work may be a rather simple user interface, but the point here is that working together visually, and I'm talking about very low fidelity sketching at whiteboards, pencil and paper, tools like Miro if you're doing it online these days. This is really important because when we talk about words, words get interpreted very differently, and it's much easier to work with visuals to get teams to come on board together and understand what are we doing together? Where are we going? What does the workflow that we want look like for the customer? It's a much better way of collaborating together. This is also the phase where I would typically do algorithm design planning. This can be where we're talking about what are the data sets that we might need that we don't have. And this may even mean that you need to perhaps create applications simply to go and collect the data that you need. And you may not even know that you needed this information until you went out in step 1 and you did that customer research and found out, hey, this is how this person currently does this work today. We're trying to augment that today. And we haven't even considered that in the model because we never went out and actually talked to this customer about how they do their work. No one actually considered that there. And so maybe this is where you might find out that, hey, we actually need to kind of do this side project here just to enable a better solution when we move into the AI space here. So there's different steps that you might do here if you're working with more advanced techniques. It's too much to get into today. Tuning reward functions and understanding the ramifications of false positives and all that kind of stuff. I like to kind of do that in this phase of the work, but again, too much detail for today. I want to get through all these. So the 5th one is getting visual. This is interface design, MVPs, and prototypes. And this is about learning fast. So this is about prototyping to learn what's working or not so that we can get stuff in front of customers quickly, get feedback before we've committed major technology to the investment. This is also where we think about all the different states of the UI. And this is important when we're using things, probabilistic technologies such as machine learning, is understanding that this solution can spit out a lot of different scenarios. And how does the user experience change based on these different scenarios that may come up? What kind of evidence, what kind of transparency is needed? What kind of recovery? What kind of second order, I need to go outside of the normal loop of this software because it's telling me to do this. This is crazy. I don't understand where this is coming from. How do I resolve that if I'm a line worker using something? It's thinking through all those scenarios. This is the time to get into doing that type of work here. This is more the user interface piece. And you will probably need a specialist for this kind of work, but you don't need it to do low fidelity prototyping. There's a lot that could be done without having a trained interface designer. And I hope by now you see by step 5 that the design process is not just about the interface. We don't jump into pixels as the first step. So MVPs, prototyping with the point of rapid learning about what's working and what's not before we've committed too much tech, right? Number 6, testing the UI UX before shipping. This has to do with actually not QA testing, not unit testing, not code testing, not all that stuff. This is about, does the solution do the thing that we promised when we talked about the design brief, but the goals, the success metrics were how we're going to measure it. Does it do that or not? One-on-one, we run people through the application. We figure out where they're getting stuck. We figure out what's working well. We understand their attitudes towards it. We validate the design of the solution before we fully committed to it. And sometimes this, in the real world, often this means that you may have an iteration that's a few months ahead of where production is, right? If you're not starting from scratch, this could be getting your design team to build runway to pick out improvements they want to make, get those in low fidelity, not working with real code behind them, get those in front of customers so that your technical teams know this is actually where we need to go. We need to start turning left and stop going right. Here's the proof. Here's what we learned. Let's start steering the ship this direction. So you got to go out and do this kind of testing. This is not about demos. This is about running people through very structured, scientific, rigorous examinations. They don't have to be scientific. They don't need to take tons of time and money and giant laboratories and all of this. There's very quick ways to do this kind of work, but the point is to validate the choices with enough time that you can actually do something about the findings. And the last one is sustaining all of this, right? How do we sustain human-centered design behaviors as the normal way that our organization is going to build data products and decision support tools? This is important. If you just treat this as a one-time thing that you try out and it doesn't work, you're not going to get any value out of it. This is an investment that has to be made at a high level to say that we are not going to. The most mature organizations might say, you know what, the quality of this thing that we're making is not good enough that we're actually not going to ship it yet. It doesn't meet our customer experience quality metrics. That is a very mature organization that can get to the point and say that, as opposed to we're going to ship whatever we got by July 1st, it's going out the door. And yeah, there's times where that may make sense. And yes, there may be something where you will still get a big win just getting the first thing out the door. There are costs associated with that, though. There are things like, I hate this. I'm sick of the tools they put out. I'm just not even going to use this anymore. If your customers keep saying this, you just lose credit with them over time, and they're just going to tune out the new stuff that you come up with. So the strategic way to do this is to make them feel like their problems matter and that you are dedicated to helping them, to putting data to use to serve their needs, because ultimately that is what unlocks the business value. So I'm not the only one singing this song here. Here's 4 others that I've been hearing a lot and just kind of been studying this whole idea of product as a mindset. Even if you're not selling software, the more and more groups are working with data, especially as you move into AI, you are effectively building out enterprise scale software inside of businesses. And even if you don't have paying customers, this product mentality is really important if you want to get out of the project mindset. Drew Smith from the IIA, they're also totally on board with this. They call it product thinking as being effective with analytics. I had Kareem Lakhani from Harvard Business School, who just wrote Competing in the Age of AI. He talks a lot about this product focus mentality and the role of the data product manager or data and analytics product manager as being a critical role. This role is also missing. This is the hub of the project. The people that manage up to the business, they take ownership for the business value, but they're also in love with the customer. They're working hand in hand with product designers and user experience professionals. They understand what's possible and needed with the technology without getting involved in writing code and all of that, but they know how to interface with your data scientists, your analytics people, your software engineers. This role is really important. It's missing a lot. The analytics translator role is kind of similar to this. I think if you call them product managers, you'd probably find it'd be easier for you to go out and find these people if you called them that, product managers. Gartner also talked about when their chief data officer version 4.0 is the move from the project centric to the product centric mindset here as well. So what's the chorus of this song? It's product, 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 right? So that's it. If you want to jump off at this point, you can, unless you'd like some help. For free help, if you want to just start slow and you're kind of curious more about this, if you go to my site/resources, I have a mailing list there. I send out 2 to 3, 4 things a week there. I have a self-assessment guide for analytics software. There's videos, the podcast, etc. There's also a free self-guided video course. You can sample module 1 for free there. And if you're looking for more in-depth help, the other ways to work with me are here on this slide. I do a lot of advisory work. I do audits of existing software. I can help you with strategy road mapping, advisory work, and then training. And so actually, this is why I said there was going to be a little offer here. On the 19th of October is the final session of 2020 of my seminar, which is called Designing Human-Centered Data Products. We work together as a group. It's 8 modules that are taught over 4 weeks. So it's 2 modules per week. It's asynchronous, so those are pre-recorded videos with text modules, and then we use the live time together on Zoom to do video calls twice a week, kind of like office hours with me. Space is limited there, and then after the 4 weeks of formal training are 2 additional weeks because some of the activities in these modules lag. They're hard to put into play that week, so I understand that, and so we kind of have these 2 extra weeks for office hours there. So you can learn more about that at designingforanalytics.com/seminar. And you can also save $400 on an individual registration or 10% off teens. And just by watching the seminar today, I'm going to automatically email you information on this because there's no way to buy right now. We're in the early bird window, so you won't see the buy button yet until next Monday. So you have to sign up before Monday using the link in the email that I'm going to send you. But you can learn about the seminar and what's involved at that link. So this point, questions, my email is here, brian@designingforanalytics.com. I'm on Twitter. I don't use Twitter a ton, but the best place is just to shoot me an email here. And I'm almost made it 33 minutes, although I did spend 2 minutes doing intro at the top of the hour. So I think I hit my 30 minutes, and I want to jump out of here. I'm going to stop sharing here and jump to questions. Does anybody have questions for me? Oh, I guess you guys saw all my notes. Well, I hope you enjoyed the notes. Let's see, questions. All right. Could you talk more about the live calls for the training? What is covered? Sure, Amy. They're very much open. So the idea here is what I do is on Fridays of each week, I release 2 modules. And my thinking is that everyone can at least get through the video and scan the modules by Monday. And then that Monday is a call to ask questions about the modules that were just dropped. And those calls are 2 hours. You don't have to stay for the whole thing. I found students often to stay to see what other students are asking and to learn what other students are doing because people are at different phases. And then the Friday is more the open office hour time where hopefully you've tried to implement something from the modules that were released earlier in the week, and you've tried to put some of that into play, and you have some feedback and questions for me at the end of the week. So these are optional. You don't have to go. I do record the calls. If someone requests it, they're going to be absent. I can record those and provide a link to those sessions if you'd like to go and watch afterwards. So I hope that answers that. And I apologize if you guys saw the presenter view of my slide deck. I did test this and that wasn't the case, but I guess something changed. So I had a question for you all, if you want to leave it in the chat, which is, I'm curious, what are your most difficult non-technical challenges creating useful data products and decision support tools? If you want to just drop a comment in there, I would love to hear what you guys are struggling with in this space. There's a reason you showed up today, and I'm curious to know how I can help. So I'll hang out here. So Suresh says validation. Okay. Politics. Yeah. What else? Loving the problem. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk. I'll go in order here. So the validation piece, right? If you don't establish at the beginning of the project what success looks like and how you will measure it, and sometimes if you have a design background here, this is akin to thinking about what does the usability test script look like at the beginning of the project instead of waiting till the end, so that everyone understands there's going to be a test at the end, and we are going to measure whether we did a good job using these criteria. And I actually structure, when I consult, a lot of my stuff, I try to work the design briefs into a format that you can naturally create a testing script that's tied back to the original design brief. You don't need to try to figure out, what do we ask in the test? It's obvious what you need to ask, because those are that's the criteria for the whole project. And so there's tons of material out there on how to do usability studies and evaluations. I cover this in the seminar that I teach, the recipe that I like to use. You don't need lots of fancy equipment. There's a lot of academic mindset here, especially in the user experience community. And I think a lot of this gets in the noise because it makes it sound like nobody except trained HCI people and user experience people can do this kind of work. I completely disagree with that. This is something where you can, it's just like, I can write some JavaScript, but you do not want me writing production JavaScript and code for your website. It doesn't mean I can't get some basic stuff done with the tooling that I need to get done. It's the same thing here. You don't have to be an expert to start getting into this and getting value out of actually getting stuff in front of customers. And a lot of it's, there's just some basic activities there that you can learn about how to facilitate a test, how to write a good script, understanding bias, getting out of the mode of demoing the solution and getting into the mode of validating the solution, and also understanding that we're not testing customers, we're testing the design, we're testing the solution, we're not testing people. So that's, I don't know if that helps you out, Suresh. Politics. So politics is a difficult one, but part of the reason I'm a big fan of empathy, it comes down to this: help people get what they want. That's really what it's about. Help people get what they want. And sometimes the group or the team doesn't know what it wants because or there's so many different ideas about what is wanted and needed. And this is where, to me, you need strong leadership, and you need, if it's a small team working on a product or an application, you need a product manager. You need someone to put a stake in the ground when there are disparate opinions about how things are supposed to go. Somebody needs to put a stake in the ground at some point and say, we're running over here. This is what we're doing until we have new information. And this skepticism is also a mindset shift that I talk about in the seminar, is having healthy skepticism that we may be wrong here, but we need to put a stake in the ground. And our goal is to learn from what we're doing and to iterate and get better at it. So the learning, the failing, or whether you're failing or you're winning, it's more important that you're learning each time what's working and what's not. So, the politics is difficult. I understand that. Sometimes this really gets back to the leadership, and I'm hoping we have leaders on this webinar because, for example, here's another example where leadership can get in the way. It's if the data science team or the analytics team is championing some new way of doing stuff for the sales team, but you don't have buy-in from the head of sales or head of accounting or whatever the department is, if the leadership team isn't on board that, hey, we're going to need 2 hours of your senior salespeople's time every single week for the next 6 weeks, if they're not on board that matters, your chance of succeeding is very low, because you're going to have to guess what it's like to be that person. And guessing is expensive. It's a great way to spend a lot of money building stuff that probably isn't going to work. So it's very important to get the stakeholders bought in on this. And it's in politics, it's a difficult thing. My thing is to try to get the team aligned around a problem set that everyone can see and agree to. And this means getting those voices in the room, and getting things boiled down to something where everyone's nodding their head to say, yes, we agree, this is how we're going to do it. Or this is what the problem is that we want to solve. Do we all agree this is a problem that's worth solving? It's difficult, but the empathy mindset can really help. I mean, this is something you hear more and more. You hear it in data storytelling, you hear it in sales, you hear it in product design. And I think people are realizing it's something that's missing a lot right now in our culture is really just caring about other people and realizing that the work we do with technology is usually not to serve us, it's to serve somebody else. And it really comes down to that. So help people get what they want. That's kind of the theme. Amber says, articulating the value before a single line of code is written. Yeah. So to me, this gets into not everything can be quantified, but if you can understand the benchmarks, and this gets back to the how are they doing things now? How do we decide if I'm purchasing carrots and produce for this region of grocery stores for this mega chain? How do I decide how many carrots to buy every quarter or every week? There's some way, an algorithm that they use in their head. I get this spreadsheet and I talk to the managers and I kind of come up with a number or whatever. How do they do it now? What is the cost associated with getting it wrong, with waste? If you can isolate that and kind of have that benchmark, then it's easier to talk about, well, here's what potentially we could do if we were able to get a more accurate idea of the number of carrots to purchase every week or something like this. This is a bad example, but I'm trying to use something we can all visualize here. You have a benchmark now, and you can talk about what may be possible, and you can also understand the risk. You can talk to the business about what is the risk of experimenting with this, which is using it, in this case, I'm guessing, Aaron, because I know you work with AI a lot. It's what is it worth to get the prediction slightly better? Here's the technology spend. We're going to learn a lot about just going through this journey together if this is an early expedition in AI for us and using an advanced technique. And so maybe there's value in simply going through that process. And my recommendation there is find a very small problem to solve that's kind of a tangent, but start with a smaller problem. But let's just use the carrot one, for example. Is the business's appetite for where's the business's appetite for risk? Do they identify themselves as an innovative company? Are they really risk averse? Part of it's understanding the culture of the company there, and then explaining to them, like, look, here are the risks. If we try to get better with carrot prediction, here are the risks associated with that. But over the next 12 months, here's the reward that could be associated with doing this better. And of course, you get that win now. Going forward, we're going to get better and better at this, especially if the model's learning from itself and all this. We could get better and better every year at this. Our waste is going to be a lot less. So the question is, like, is it worth spending $500,000 or $1 million on this solution here, which may or may not work great? Is it worth trading $1 million of time and spend to a $5 million theoretical save over the next 5 years? You cannot decide the value of that to the stakeholder. The value is all in the eyes of the recipient. But I think part of this is, and this is something I do a lot, is elevating these solutions to the point where someone can put it into dollar and cents, especially in a business context, right? Is justifying that, but realizing that you can't establish the value. The value is something that's in their head, and your job is to guide them to a possible recommendation based on what they value. It's not to impose a solution on them. It's to meet them where they are and say, well, this is what I would recommend based on your risk appetite, the value that's potentially here. It's to guide them to that process. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's how I think about it, at least. Something someone pointed out to me this week is, what if the carrot guy gets hit by a bus? I like to say wins the lottery. There might be more value. True. And this also gets back to the, like, part of the reason we design interfaces and experiences, and training always frightens me, is that training assumes that if someone leaves, you got to go through this heavy process here. It's like, well, what would it be like if the new person can come into this role and it really doesn't require a lot of training for them to use these systems because they're elegantly designed, they're intuitive, they're made this way. Now, there are exceptions here, right? Like an airplane cockpit. There's a million buttons and dials, especially like in a jet fighter. They are intentionally complex devices requiring lots of changes because they need independent control over a lot of these systems. They do not want everything to be necessarily automated all the time. So not every system is better because it has less bells and whistles, I'll call it, knobs, dials, buttons, features, and all of this. Sometimes you need that stuff. You will not know the right number of the right amount of complexity if you're not doing that one-on-one research. You're never going to know. You're just going to be guessing what people need. And what I find happens a lot in engineering culture is that you're better off giving people all the control in the world because we don't know we can't possibly represent them. So let's just give them all the control in the world and they'll figure it out. Well, that is not necessarily, that's a cop out is what that is. That's assuming that they're going to have the training of like a pilot gets in order to use this thing and that they care. But the reality is, it's like, this is not their only job. Most likely their only job is not to use this interface all day. They're not going to want to spend the time on that. And there is a lot of people's assumption is it's designed this way because someone gave it some thought and it's supposed to be this way. They're just going to assume that the interface is this way because you spent time figuring out what I want as the user. They're not going to assume that it's their job to put it together. So that's my take on that. Cool. Any other questions here? I know we're at about, I'll stay for about 10 more minutes if we have some more here. But those are great questions. Thank you, Amy and Amber. I put a question in the box. Okay. Oh, sorry, I did not scroll. Oh, interface design, right? Okay. I'm zooming in. Can you comment or share some examples from your work regarding step 2, what things measured, how you gathered the data to measure it, what the results look like? Things like easier to use can sometimes be subjective or at least hard to measure. I'm curious to hear some comments or experience with this. Okay, so are you talking, so step 2 was the synthesizing research into human-centered problems and needs. So yeah, this process is this is probably hard to explain in words in the time that we have available to us today. But the point of the setting the goals to measure the sex, yeah, okay. So ultimately, there's an assumption here that the stakeholders are bought into the idea that the way the customer is going to interact with the solution matters and that their adoption of the service has an impact on the business. And most of the time, this means their lack of adoption of the service means the technology is a waste. This may sound obvious. I don't know if this sounds obvious, but it's not obvious in my experience. The assumption is that we'll come up with something with code and materials and data and all the stuff we have, and then people will use it. And if they don't know how to use it, that it's their fault. That mindset has to shift, and that may require some training there to articulate things in a way that they start to realize, like, is it going to be the customer's fault or is it going to be our fault if it doesn't perform well? And do you, dear stakeholder, think that we should measure whether or not people can and will adopt this solution? Does the utility and the usability of the solution matter to you? Because the way we see it, our team, is that if no one uses this stuff or they try it and it doesn't work, that none of this effort matters. And we just became a cost center for you instead of, we're not an innovation team. We are just a giant cost at this point. So if you can get people to see it this way, and a great way to do this is when you're doing usability examinations or when you're doing ride along research, which is when I go out and spend a day with a customer to watch how they do their job. Take a video camera, and when you see them stumble, say, "Hey, would you mind if I just record you doing that again or screen share? That fascinated me the way you did X, Y, and Z. Could you show that to me?" And most of the time they'll say, "Sure, I'd be happy to walk you through it." They probably don't even think it's troublesome, but maybe you see this really convoluted process they use and you record that. And I'm telling you, getting video of a customer struggling with something is probably the most powerful way to get people to change. And if the company touts this line of oh, we're customer driven, and it's kind of this fluffy language that everybody uses. Well, if we're really customer driven, here's the customer and look what it's like for them. This is raw, unedited. It's just 2 minutes of watching this person, just crawling through this really difficult to use thing, or maybe bypassing the entire, sometimes it's I don't really use that dashboard. I go over here and do this other thing. It's we just spent 6 months on this dashboard and they don't even use it. Showing that is powerful. It's such a powerful way to change mindsets. It's powerful for technical people on the team. It's powerful for stakeholders, and it puts facts behind what we're talking about. So this is a valuable way to do it. Also, inviting these stakeholders, if you can get that buy-in, it's getting designs done early and getting them in front of customers, but also inviting the stakeholders into these sessions as well. This is a great way to do this is just run the studies, run your sessions one-on-one with the customer, get permission to record it, but broadcast it to a separate room if we're all back in the same building. Have a lunch room. Everyone brings their lunch, and we're watching TV. And today's show is John and Jane from accounting using this new thing, the software prototype. Ask them to come along and just observe. And this repeated activity of getting not polished, not finished software in front of people, prototypes, designs, getting that feedback. This is customer-driven work. And if you can get the leadership bought into knowing that you're doing that, some of the politics will also, I'm kind of rambling here, but the politics that you asked about earlier, some of that will go away, because if they see that you're actually involving these customers and stakeholders in the process regularly, and they see that this is happening every Tuesday, they're going to buy into what your team is doing, because they're just going to have the seed in their head that you're not guessing, that you're actually going out of your way to be customer focused, to involve the people that matter in the solution, and that you're not working in isolation in a room by yourself and then throwing something over the wall. That will probably bring some relief to skeptical management. I hope you don't have skeptical management, but again, it's powerful. The customer voice is powerful. Whether that's an internal employee or whatever it may be, it's powerful. So I hope that answered the question for you. Loving the problem, definitely. Okay, so and Amy had asked about loving the problem definitely resonates with me, but is this something you can train for, or is this something you have to look for in hiring? So it is a mindset shift. I like to believe that anybody can do this. If I would say this, if the organization values this skill and they value this as a cultural thing, they may not be great at it, but I like to think that most of this stuff is about effort, trying, and caring, and it's less about an innate talent. I think personalities do matter. I can usually tell, within the first week or two of working with a client. A lot of times it's with I work a lot with engineers and analytical people. I can kind of tell who has the potential to switch or to wear the two hats, as I call it, the implementation hat and the design hat, right? One's about solving a problem. The other one's about finding a problem. I can kind of get a sense for who will be naturally good at that. But sometimes people get good at it too. It just takes a lot longer for the light to go on, to start to think differently about problems and needs and the customer perspective, and get out of the implementation mentality. It can take longer. I think a lot of it, again, is the culture and the willingness to try it, and it's less about a special talent. If you want to go faster, yes, hiring for this skill, hiring for people that know how to do this is faster. So some of this comes down to, how big is your pain right now? How much do you want to change this right now? Is this urgent, or is this a long-term strategic change you're making? Do you want it done for you? Do you want to do it together? Do you want to let someone try to get better on their own? This is really about time. How important is it? So I think you can train for it. But if they don't want to do it and the business isn't rewarding this, and I don't necessarily mean with money, but if the company culture doesn't reward this, and a great example of that is, if all their comp and their reviews and all this stuff is simply focused on how much code they're shipping and how they contributed to the technical parts of modeling data and all these technical stuff, if that's what all of their value at the end of the year comes down to, and you say that you care about this other stuff, this qualitative stuff, this human stuff that is not as easier to manage, well, that's a problem to me, right? Because the company is valuing one skill set, but they say they care about the other one. It's basically paying lip service. So I think the organization has to set that culture in place, that this matters, and then work on that. And ultimately, yeah, not everyone's going to be great at it, but someone has to take responsibility for this. Some people will be better at it. Not, again, how fast do you want to go? That's how I would break it down. So, cool. Well, we only have 1 minute left. If there's one last question, I'll take it. Otherwise, thank you for joining the call here. Again, you'll get a follow-up email from me if you're interested in that discount, which, again, that ends a Sunday night Eastern, to get the $400 off. So watch your inbox or shoot me an email if you're interested. I can send you information if you don't get a message from me. But I wanted to thank you all for coming. Wear your masks, please, and be safe out there. Yeah, and so I'm just going to hang for one more minute. It is 3 o'clock now, so I think I'm going to hang it up at this point. So again, thank you for everything, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Have a great weekend. All right. See you, Amy, Amber, all y'all, Suresh. Nice to see you guys. Take care.